Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Shawn Thinking Out Loud. I'm your host, Shawn Armstrong, and today we're diving deep into a whirlwind of topics that have the loony left, yes, I said it, acting a little bit more loony than usual. Buckle up, folks, because this is going to be a long one. First, the United States has a complex immigration system, and the laws governing it are often misunderstood or misrepresented. For instance, did you know that it is considered a felony to enter the country illegally? Yep. And guess what? It's also a felony to obstruct ICE from carrying out their duties when they're trying to apprehend individuals who are here illegally. These facts may sound harsh to some, but they highlight the seriousness of our immigration policies. Now, I know this is a serious topic for many people, so I want to encourage open-mindedness as we explore this further. Let's break down some of the core points regarding immigration law. First off, when we talk about illegal immigration, we're not just discussing numbers or statistics, we're talking about real lives and real families. Many who cross borders do so out of desperation or in search of a better life. However, that doesn't negate the legal framework that exists. On one hand, many argue that strict enforcement of immigration laws is necessary for national security and public safety. On the other hand, there's an argument for compassion and understanding, recognizing that many immigrants face dire situations in their home countries. So, where does that leave us? Are we supposed to prioritize laws over humanity, or can we find a middle ground where both can coexist? I've written extensively on this topic in various books focusing on politics and history. If you're interested in delving deeper into these subjects, I have audiobooks available, and you can find the link in the description below. Here's something interesting. Did you know that according to a 2020 Pew Research Center report, about 10.5 million illegal aliens were living in the United States? That's a staggering number. And here's a quote from former President Ronald Reagan. "A nation without borders is not a nation." This speaks volumes about the importance of having laws in place while also considering the human aspect of immigration. So, what are our key takeaways? Immigration laws are complex and multifaceted. They affect individuals and families in profound ways. While it's crucial to uphold the law, we must also remember the human side of this issue. As we navigate these challenging conversations, let's strive for understanding rather than division. Guess what? I've got the gender-confused crowd freaking out by simply quoting biology books. Yes, you heard that right. But don't worry, I'm not here just to stir the pot. I want to have an open conversation about what it means to understand our biological identities and the implications that come with it. Now, I recently had a chat with some folks in forensic pathology, people who literally study the human body after death. You know, the ones who can determine your gender just by examining your skeletal remains. It's fascinating stuff. They've never been wrong about a person's gender based on biological evidence. But somehow, we've reached a point where stating these facts causes chaos. Why is that? What's happened to the way we think about identity? Let's get straight to the point. If you believe you're something you're not, that's one thing. But expecting the rest of the world to play along with that belief, well, that's a different ball game entirely. If you think everyone else should conform to your version of reality, my friends, we might need to have a serious discussion about mental health. And here's something I've been pondering. With Pride Month upon us, I'm still waiting for someone to tell me what they're actually proud of. Sure, pride is about celebrating who we are, but let's take a moment to reflect. What if someone is just, well, an asshole? Shouldn't we hold people accountable for their actions instead of celebrating them just because they identify as part of a certain group? And let's talk about children for a second. If there's a kid under 14 within earshot of you and they know about your sexual preferences in explicit detail, I can't help but question your role in their life. Grooming isn't just about physical actions, it's about the ideas we expose them to. Now, I want to share a quote that has stuck with me. The truth may hurt for a little while, but a lie hurts forever. Isn't that powerful? We need to embrace the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. And speaking of discomfort, did you know that studies show people are less likely to engage in critical thinking when their beliefs are challenged? It's called cognitive dissonance. We have to push through that discomfort if we ever want to grow. So, what have we covered? We've talked about biology versus belief systems, accountability in our communities, and the importance of maintaining honest conversations even when they're tough. Remember, respect is earned, not given. You know how I'm always pointing out the 1 in 4 high school graduate statistics? How they can't read above a 6th grade level? It's alarming and funny at the same time. We're not just going to talk about literacy rates, we're going to explore what this says about our education system, society, and even how we communicate with each other online. Now, let's set the stage. Imagine scrolling through your social media feed and coming across posts filled with misunderstandings, misused words, and comments that can make a psychiatrist's mouth water. There's that new boat I want. It's a bit of a digital jungle out there, but behind every typo or poorly constructed sentence, there's a deeper issue at play. Literacy is not just about being able to read and write, it's about understanding and engaging with the world around us. And that 1 in 4 statistic, it's more than just numbers. It reflects on our society's educational priorities and the resources allocated to foster critical thinking and comprehension skills. Go back and watch my video on the true minority. Let's break this down further. First off, why are so many high school graduates struggling with reading? Some might argue that technology plays a role. With texting lingo dominating communication, think LOL instead of laughing out loud, are we sacrificing language skills for brevity? And then there's the educational aspect. Are schools adequately preparing students for the real world? With all the emphasis on standardized testing, are we losing sight of teaching kids how to think critically and express themselves clearly? Then, of course, there's only so many hours in the day. We have to get these kids indoctrinated. We can't be messing around with things like reading, writing, science, and mathematics. I mean, I've written on a variety of topics: politics, history, martial arts, and even firearms. So I know firsthand how essential it is to convey complex ideas in an accessible manner. If you're interested in diving deeper into these subjects, don't forget to check out my audiobooks. The link is in the description. Then, of course, we have the lazy factor. Most people won't read. Most people won't even listen to an audiobook, especially if that book doesn't validate their worldview. I have loony leftists critiquing my books who have never read my books. Contrary to what they think, if just the title is upsetting them, I believe it's a well-written book with a well-thought-out title. Now, let's spice things up with a fun fact. Did you know that approximately 32 million adults in the U.S. can't read? That's roughly 14% of the population. Imagine the stories untold, the potential wasted. Here's a quote by Maya Angelou that resonates deeply with this topic. I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel. This highlights the importance of effective communication, not just for academic purposes, but for human connection as well. Let's reflect on what we've discussed. Literacy isn't merely about reading words on a page. It's about understanding context, engaging with content, and expressing oneself clearly. Our education system needs to address these challenges head on. And remember, before jumping into online debates or leaving comments on posts, let's strive to elevate our discourse. What happens when a terrorist suspect's family is detained by immigration authorities? Is it fair to penalize loved ones for the actions of one individual? Let's unpack the recent arrest of the family of Mohammed Solomon, a terrorist suspect from Boulder, and examine the implications of their potential deportation. In a shocking turn of events, the White House announced that Mohammed Solomon's wife and 5 children are facing deportation after being taken into ICE custody. This decision comes on the heels of significant media coverage and reporting from investigative journalist Laura Loomer, who has been vocal about the family's legal status following their father's involvement in a terror attack. The big question arises, were they in the U.S. legally or illegally? Reports indicate that their visas had been revoked, which could imply that they overstayed their welcome in the country. But what does this mean for the broader discussion on immigration policy and national security? Let's break this down. 1. The role of immigration enforcement. The Department of Homeland Security has confirmed that all visas for Solomon's family have been revoked, leading to their expedited removal. This raises questions about the effectiveness and fairness of our immigration system. Should innocent family members suffer consequences for their relatives' actions? 2. Public reactions. The public reaction has been mixed. On one hand, many believe that the entire family should return to their home country due to the father's criminal actions. On the other hand, critics argue that punishing the children and wife is unjust, especially if they had no involvement in the crime. 3. Political implications. It's interesting to note how political figures are reacting. For instance, former advisor Stephen Miller has voiced his dissatisfaction with current deportation rates, indicating a divide in opinions about how aggressively immigration laws should be enforced. 4. Cultural context. The cultural background of individuals like Mohammed Solomon also play a role in this conversation. Some argue that violence can be viewed differently in various contexts, particularly in regions affected by conflict. This leads us to consider how society interprets acts of terror and resistance. To quote Laura Loomer, DHS has exclusively confirmed that Muslim Brotherhood terrorist Mohammed Solomon's wife and 5 kids have officially been taken into ICE custody. Her reporting has highlighted not only the legal ramifications, but also the broader implications of these events on public perception of immigration policy. Additionally, consider this. What if we were discussing a scenario where the family of a perpetrator involved in a domestic attack faced similar consequences? Would the same outrage exist? So, what have we learned? The arrest and potential deportation of Mohammed Solomon's family brings to light significant issues surrounding immigration enforcement, family responsibility, and cultural perceptions of violence. It raises profound questions about justice, accountability, and the nature of our immigration policies. Now, I know what you're thinking. Shawn, are you really going to talk about that guy? Yes, indeed. We're talking about Bob Reich. Yes, the same Bob who once wanted to throw people in prison for speech he didn't like. This morning I stumbled across one of his posts where he was lecturing on tyranny. Oh boy. If only he could have been lecturing on irony instead. That would have made an interesting lead-in. Now, let's set the stage here. Free speech is a cornerstone of democracy, a principle that allows us to express our thoughts and ideas without fear of repression. Yet, here we are in a world where the line between protecting free speech and suppressing it is becoming increasingly blurred. Bob's lectures on tyranny remind us that It's not just about what we say, but also about who gets to decide what is acceptable speech. And this is where irony comes into play. The very act of wanting to silence others can sometimes lead to the tyrannical behaviors that we claim to be against. Right, Bob? So let's dig in a little deeper into this concept. In today's society, we often see people calling for censorship on social media, in public forums, even in academic institutions. Aren't you a professor, Bob? The argument usually revolves around protecting others from hate speech or misinformation. But who defines hate? Who decides what constitutes misinformation? Let's talk about misinformation, Bob. That computer is Russian misinformation. If you get the hokey pokey, you can't get the virus. The virus came from someone eating a bat. It didn't come from a lab leak. Russian collusion. Joe Biden is as sharp as he's ever been. Do I need to go on, Bob? Perhaps you should just delete your YouTube account, because you're an idiot. I have a wide range of books on politics, history, Brazil, martial arts, and firearms, an eclectic mix for sure, but the one thing they all share is the exploration of power dynamics and how they influence our freedoms. If you're curious about these topics, feel free to check out the audiobooks available. The link is in the description. Let's take a quick detour into history. Did you know that during the French Revolution, freedom of speech was initially championed? Yet, as soon as the revolutionaries gained power, they began silencing dissenters themselves. It's a classic case of the oppressor becoming the oppressed, isn't it? Imagine if Bob had been at that revolution. He might have been calling for free speech one moment and then pushing for the censorship the next. As we navigate these complex waters, let's reflect on a quote from George Orwell. If liberty means anything at all, it means the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. That's a powerful thought. It challenges us to consider just our own beliefs or also how we react to those who oppose them. So, what can we take away from this discussion? First and foremost, it's crucial to protect free speech, both for ourselves and for others. Second, let's remain vigilant against the allure of tyranny that can creep in when we start silencing those with whom we disagree. Finally, never underestimate the power of irony. Sometimes those who shout the loudest about freedom are the very ones who would impose limits if given half a chance. Grumpy Farmer might be interested in this one. 2 Chinese nationals have recently been charged with attempting to smuggle a dangerous fungus into the United States. This isn't just a random incident. It's part of a larger pattern that raises questions about national security and agricultural safety. So, sit tight as we unpack this alarming story and what it means for all of us. From the Department of Justice, 2 individuals, Youngki Jian and Zhuiying Lu, pretty sure I mispronounced those, but don't care, are accused of trying to bring into the U.S. a fungus known as Fusarium graminearium. It's classified as a potential agricultural terrorism weapon. That's right, agricultural terrorism. This is not the first time we've heard about foreign nationals attempting to smuggle harmful substances or sensitive biological materials into the country, particularly from China. Remember, just a few years ago, we had instances of Chinese nationals trying to steal medical research or smuggle out viruses. The consistent theme? A breach of trust that could have devastating consequences for our economy and health. Now, let's break this down. The DOJ claims that these 2 individuals were receiving funding from the Chinese government for their research, some of it even linked to the University of Michigan. The facts are troubling. Jian's electronics allegedly contained information indicating her loyalty to the Chinese Communist Party. Let's take a step back. When we hear about threats to our national security, many people immediately think of Russia. A friend of mine recently argued that Russia is our greatest adversary. While I agree they pose significant challenges, the narrative often overlooks the threats posed by China, especially when it comes to infiltration and espionage. What's particularly alarming about this case is how it reflects ongoing issues in our academic institutions. We've given away so much of our manufacturing base and allowed individuals loyal to the Communist Party access to sensitive information, research, and data. This isn't just an isolated incident, it's indicative of broader systemic vulnerabilities. Now, let's talk about the implications of this fungus. The fungus is notorious for causing head blight in crops like wheat, barley, corn, and rice. This disease results in billions of dollars of losses globally each year. If these individuals intended to unleash this pathogen on our agricultural systems, it could cripple our food supply and significantly impact our economy. The Attorney General stated that the DOJ has no higher mission than keeping the American people safe. But I can't help but wonder how many more incidents like this are lurking beneath the surface. We need to be vigilant. Here's the thought-provoking quote to consider. The greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence. It's to act with yesterday's logic. This rings especially true as we navigate these complex international dynamics. Also, did you know that this isn't an isolated incident? In 2018, U.S. Customs and Border Protection agents intercepted a Chinese biologist at Detroit Metropolitan Airport who was caught with vials labeled as containing viruses like SARS. This pattern indicates an ongoing threat that we must address. To recap, the charges against the Chinese agents highlight a serious national security concern involving an agricultural bioterrorism. It underscores the importance of scrutinizing foreign influence within our research institutions and remaining aware of the ongoing threats from nations like China. You know, the country that the Bidens got millions of dollars from. I've got a spicy topic that might ruffle a few feathers. We're diving into a controversial and humorous perspective on marriage. Now, before you roll your eyes, hear me out. Today we're going to explore 5 ways that marriage is basically a prison sentence for men. Yes, you heard that right. It's going to be a wild ride, so buckle up. Marriage, an institution revered by many, yet for countless men, it can feel like serving time. I've been there myself, as have many of other men. The dream of happily ever after can sometimes morph into a reality that resembles, well, a prison sentence. So let's break this down and have some fun with it. Point 1, loss of freedom. First up, let's talk about freedom, or the lack thereof. In prison, you need permission to leave your cell. In marriage, you need permission to leave the house. Want to run to the store? Better check in with the warden first. And if you're gone for more than 14 minutes without a text back, expect a call from the guards, aka her besties, questioning your loyalty. Spontaneity? Forget it. Your weekend fishing trip with the buddies is canceled because she's booked a brunch with her sister. Point 2, meal choices. Next, let's discuss meal choices. In prison, it's whatever slop they serve on that day. In marriage, it's whatever diet she's on that week. Keto, paleo, vegan, you name it. It's all pretty bland, and trust me, if Amnesty International found out what you're being fed at home, they'd intervene. And don't even think about ordering a pizza. That's grounds for re-education. Point 3, conditional conjugal visits. Now, let's get into conjugal visits. Yes, those are conditional too. In prison, if you behave well, you might get a visit once in a while. In marriage, that checklist is significantly longer. Did you take out the trash? Did you fold the towels correctly? Did you tell her she's beautiful and not just in an obligatory way? One slip up and your romantic evening turns into watching another Netflix documentary about male privilege instead of what you had in mind. Point 4, stuck with your cellmate. Then there's the matter of your cellmate. In prison, you might end up with someone you don't get along with. But guess what? You're stuck in marriage too. She thinks she can read your mind and will definitely control the thermostat while bringing up things you said in 2014 during arguments about who does the dishes. No escaping here. You're in it for life. Point 5. The sentence never ends. Lastly, the big one, prison sentences usually end. But marriage? Oh, buddy, that's forever. Even if you get divorced, that's when the real punishment begins. Divorce court is like Monopoly, but with her getting all the properties, and good luck trying to see your kids on her schedule. Escape attempts? Don't even think about it. The state will mobilize to bring you back. Here's a little bonus for you. In prison, they can parole you if you've been good. But in marriage, even if she cheats with her yoga instructor named Sven, guess what? You're still serving life without parole. No good behavior credits here. And remember, the next time one of your buddies says, "Hey man, I'm getting married," don't say congratulations. Instead say, "Good luck with your sentence, inmate." So there you have it. Marriage can feel like a prison sentence for many men, with loss of freedom, questionable meal choices, conditional affection, no escape options, and a lifetime commitment that can feel like a life sentence. But remember, this is all in good fun. Now we're diving into a topic that's close to my heart and relevant for many: relationships. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Relationships can be a minefield of emotions, expectations, and, let's face it, sometimes drama. But today, I want to discuss a more serious angle. What happens when we bring the wrong things to the table in a relationship? So, let's set the stage. Picture this. You're in a relationship, and your partner seems more like a roommate than a romantic companion. There's no spark, no excitement, just routine and responsibilities. Now, ladies, if all you bring to the table is negativity, complaints, and a laundry list of duties for him to fulfill, he might just feel like he's joined the army, only he's not getting paid to be miserable. He's paying for it. It might sound harsh, but think about it. If the only contribution you're making is a sense of obligation or dissatisfaction, is that really a relationship? Or is it just a business arrangement? Let's dig deeper. Relationships should be built on mutual respect, love, and support. But when one partner feels overwhelmed by demands and negativity from the other, it creates an imbalance. Here's the deal. Every healthy relationship thrives on positivity and shared goals. When one partner feels like they're constantly under fire or just fulfilling duties without any emotional connection or joy, it can lead to resentment. Let me share a personal observation. I've noticed that people often fall into patterns where they rely heavily on their partners for emotional support without reciprocating. It's like expecting someone to fill your cup while you pour all your troubles into theirs. That's not fair. Imagine if instead you brought enthusiasm, understanding, and a willingness to grow together. Suddenly, that relationship transformed from a chore into an adventure. Here's a quote I love from Maya Angelou. "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." This is so true in relationships. It's not just about what you bring, it's about how you make your partner feel. And did you know that studies have shown that couples who engage in positive communication report higher satisfaction in their relationships? A little appreciation goes a long way. So, what are the key takeaways? First, recognize the importance of bringing positivity to your relationship. Second, avoid falling into the trap of obligation and negativity. Lastly, strive for balance. Make sure both parties feel valued and appreciated. Relationships are not meant to be one-sided. They should uplift and inspire both individuals involved. Next, we're diving into a hot topic that's been stirring the political pot: why young men seem to be drifting away from the Democrat Party. You might be wondering, what's driving this shift? Well, let's get right into it. Over the past few months, it's become increasingly clear that the Democrat Party has a significant issue on its hands: a growing disconnection with young men. As we've seen in various polls, male voters, particularly young men, are skewing heavily towards the right, and that gap is only widening. The Democrats recognize this problem. It's hard not to notice when the numbers are so stark. But here's the kicker. They seem utterly clueless about how to fix it. Now, just last week, I watched a segment featuring David Hogg on Bill Maher's show, where he offered his thoughts on this very issue. Spoiler alert, he was as out of touch as you'd expect from someone who's essentially a 95-pound gun control activist trying to speak for masculinity. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The Democrats managed to find someone even less qualified to discuss men, Olivia Giuliana, a 22-year-old far-left activist and influencer. Let's break that down. Olivia identifies as a queer, plus-size, disabled Latina, and on the surface, she checks none of the boxes that would resonate with young men. Yet, here she is, offering her insights on how the Democrats can win back this demographic. It's almost comical, isn't it? In her segment, she suggests that when discussing issues like abortion with young men, we need to frame it in a way that acknowledges their fears of responsibility. She argues that we should tell them, if you don't support abortion rights, you might end up having to care for a child. Now, let's unpack that for a moment. First off, Olivia does acknowledge that the unborn child is indeed a child, which is rare in abortion discussions. But framing the conversation as a threat of responsibility is hardly persuasive. Who thinks it's appealing to say, hey, you better support killing your baby or you'll have to take care of it? It's not exactly going to win hearts and minds. Olivia also claims to spend time with young men on college campuses and believes they're largely supportive of progressive issues like abortion and immigration. But let's be honest, her idea of connecting with frat guys seems more like wishful thinking than reality. Imagine a group of frat guys gathered around a keg and suddenly saying, you know what this party needs? A fat, queer Latina feminist. Yeah, right. The truth is, many young men feel suffocated by societal expectations and often see Democrats as perpetuating those very pressures. And here's an interesting fact. Recent studies show that many young men feel they're being set up for failure by societal norms that dictate they must secure high-paying jobs before starting families. So when Olivia claims that Republicans are creating these issues, she misses the mark entirely. So, what's the takeaway from all of this? The Democrats have an uphill battle in winning back young men, not just because of their policies, but because they fail to engage with them authentically. They need to understand that men want respect and recognition, not parental figures at the ballot box. Next, let's ramble on about politics, identity, and what it means to throw around labels like fascist. It's a loaded word, one that seems to get tossed around without much thought these days. So here's the deal. Over the past couple of days, I found myself in a rather surreal position being called a fascist by actual fascists. Let that sink in for a second. We're talking about individuals who would go so far as to set fire to property because of political beliefs, or those who would disrupt college campuses just to silence opposing voices. These are the people who seem to have lost sight of what true political discourse looks like. One of the geniuses came up with, "Don't you have some brown people to set fire to?" First of all, we're not the ones who set fire to stuff when we're upset. Second, you idiots should check out people's profiles. I'm pretty sure if my wife spoke fluent English, my brown wife would be telling you where to go, and I'm pretty sure it won't be anywhere you want to. When we think of fascism, we typically envision totalitarian regimes or extreme suppression of dissent. Yet, today, it seems anyone who dares to challenge certain narratives can be slapped with that label. And honestly, pretty much anyone who thinks Bernie Sanders or AOC are mental giants are the ones acting like fascists. Something tells me they walk around smelling like BO and gasoline. First off, let's talk about the term fascism. Historically, it refers to authoritarian ultranationalism characterized by dictatorial power and the suppression of opposition. But when you call someone a fascist for merely holding different political views, where does that leave us? What does that say about your ability to engage in meaningful dialogue? You know, in my various readings, from politics to history, even martial arts, I've learned that understanding context is key. Just as you wouldn't throw a punch in martial arts without knowing your opponent's stance, you shouldn't label someone without understanding their viewpoint. Here's the kicker. Labeling someone fascist doesn't just shut down the conversation, it shuts down the possibility of finding common ground. And isn't that what we should be striving for? We should be striving for it. However, there are just some people that you will never find common ground with, nor should you try. If their idea of political discourse is gouging a swastika in the side of someone's car, don't bother. Their IQs aren't high enough, and they will need to be deprogrammed from their cult before you should ever try to communicate. Now, I want to share a quote that resonates deeply with this issue. It's from George Orwell. And I say this a lot because it seems to fit a lot. In a time of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And boy, doesn't that ring true today. In a world where labels and outrage often drown out honest discussion, we need to be brave enough to speak the truth, no matter how unpopular it may be. Speaking of context, did you know that the word fascism itself originated in Italy in the early 20th century? It comes from the fasces, which were a bundle of rods symbolizing strength through unity. Ironically, that concept has been twisted into something divisive today. And here's a fun fact. Fascism as an ideology isn't limited to any one political spectrum. Historically, both right and left movements have adopted elements of fascist principles at various times. So maybe it's time we look past our differences and understand how we can collectively work against actual fascism, such as the KKK, Antifa, BLM, all groups started by the same political party. Weird. From the KKK to BLM and Antifa, the Democrat Party is the oldest, the largest, the most successful hate group in American history. So what have we learned? 1. Labels like fascist can be damaging and often misused. 2. True dialogue requires understanding and willingness to listen. 3. Sometimes there are people whom you can't listen to. They're too far gone. 4. The Democrat Party is the same old hate group. The only thing that changes is who they hate based on political expediency. 5. Speaking the truth is essential, even when it feels uncomfortable. As we navigate these complex conversations, remember, it's not about silencing the opposition, but about finding ways to coexist with diverse perspectives. The next topic is not just about politics, but about the very fabric of our nation, immigration and national security. With the recent discussion surrounding President Biden's border policies, the stakes have never been higher. In fact, Tom Homan, Donald Trump's ICE director, has stated that due to these policies, we'll be dealing with national security threats for the next decade. So let's break it down. What does this mean for us as a nation? Let's think out loud together. As many of you know, the southern border has become a focal point of heated debate in America, with reports highlighting staggering numbers like 2 million known gotaways. We must ask ourselves, what are the implications of such an open border policy? What risk did they invite in terms of national security? Tom Homan recently appeared on Fox News and said something that really resonated with me. He emphasized that previous administration created the biggest national security vulnerability this country has ever seen. That's a bold statement, but is it true? Let's dig deeper into this. Holman highlighted key issues: sex trafficking, drug smuggling, and the significant rise in undocumented individuals crossing our borders. This is not just a crisis, it's a catastrophe waiting to unfold. What are the core points? 1. Impact of open borders. Holman's concern about unvetted individuals entering the country raises serious questions. When we don't know who these individuals are or where they came from, we're gambling with our national safety. 2. The role of oversight. Where's the oversight? If we can track 10.5 million illegal aliens crossing the border, why didn't they do more to secure it? Instead, we see protests against ICE officers who are simply doing their jobs. This disconnect between local communities and federal law enforcement is alarming. 3. A permanent strain. Holman suggested this issue may last longer than 10 years, potentially reshaping our political landscape as new ideologies emerge from those who enter without proper vetting. 4. Sanctuary cities. Interestingly, some sanctuary cities are beginning to reconsider their stances. Philadelphia, for instance, recently declared itself a welcoming city instead of a sanctuary city. This change might reflect a broader shift in public sentiment towards immigration policies. 5. The political power play. As more undocumented immigrants enter the country, there's a real concern about losing political power for those who advocate for a sovereign nation. If political factions shift significantly, will we still have the political will to enforce immigration laws? Let me share an analogy I find particularly striking. Imagine if 10 million Americans attempted to cross into Mexico illegally. Do you think they'd be welcomed with open arms? Absolutely not. They would face immediate repercussions. This disparity in how nations treat immigration highlights a critical flaw in our own policy enforcement. And here's a thought. What if we implemented an immigration moratorium for a few years to reassess who enters our country? It might sound extreme, but perhaps it's time to hit pause and think strategically about our future. The border crisis isn't just about numbers. It's about national security, community safety, and our identity as a sovereign nation. Tom Holman's insights serve as a wake-up call for all of us to engage in this crucial discussion. Our next topic is a bit of a controversy in the Windy City. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson's recent declaration that President Donald Trump is a terrorist. Yes, you heard that right. It seems the pressure is mounting on our woke mayor as he grapples with federal scrutiny and dwindling approval ratings. In recent days, Mayor Brandon Johnson has been making headlines for his explosive remarks regarding Trump and the federal government's stance on funding for Chicago. With the Department of Justice investigating allegations of racial discrimination in his administration, Johnson appears to be feeling the heat. In a rather theatrical fashion, he's claimed that withholding federal funds is akin to terrorism. But what does this all mean for the people of Chicago? Are these accusations just a distraction from his administration's struggles? Let's break down what's happening here. First off, Johnson kicked off Africa Day with a speech celebrating the contributions of African communities in Chicago. A noble gesture, no doubt. But then he took a hard turn, suggesting that Trump's actions are directly harming black and working class communities. He said, "We're not going to negotiate with terrorists," referring to withholding of funds due to Chicago's sanctuary city status. Now, I get it. Politics is heated, but calling the President of the United States a terrorist, that's a bold claim, especially since an illegal alien just committed an act of terrorism in a sanctuary city. Johnson seems to be losing support amongst Chicagoans as they express their frustration over rising crime rates and economic issues. Instead of taking accountability for his administration's policies, or lack thereof, he's pointing fingers at Trump. And let's talk about the media scrutiny he's under. William J. Kelly, a local reporter, has been relentless in asking tough questions. In one recent exchange, he confronted Johnson about his mental health and the public's concerns regarding his leadership. Honestly, watching Johnson squirm when asked if he's okay was quite revealing. It leads to an important question. Is Mayor Johnson just deflecting his failures onto Trump? The approval rating suggests that many in Chicago are fed up. In fact, reports indicate that his approval rating is now in the single digits. Here's a fun fact for you. Did you know that Chicago has historically been a hotbed of political drama? From Al Capone to Harold Washington, the city knows how to keep things interesting. But unlike those historic figures, who at least had some accomplishments under their belts, it seems Johnson is digging himself deeper into controversy rather than building bridges. And speaking of bridges, how about this quote from Thomas Jefferson? In matters of style, swim with the current. In matters of principle, stand like a rock. It seems like Mayor Johnson could use a little reminder about principles and accountability. So, what can we take away from all of this? Mayor Brandon Johnson's approach to leadership has led him into turbulent waters. His incendiary remarks about Trump may rally some supporters, but are likely pushing many away. The question remains, will he take responsibility for his administration's failures or continue to blame external forces? Now we're headed to Minnesota, where riots erupted in response to FBI and ICE raids. Buckle up, folks. This one's going to be a roller coaster. So here's the situation. Nick Shirley, a dedicated journalist, was on the ground capturing the chaos as it unfolded. Reports have surfaced that the FBI was serving a warrant related to human trafficking. But in the midst of all that, some activists were shouting that ICE was out there kidnapping people. Absurd, right? This leads us to an important discussion about what really is happening when law enforcement conducts these operations. Are we witnessing a critical action against criminals, or is there something more insidious at play? Let's kick things off with some context. Nick caught footage where witnesses mentioned that the FBI was involved in a human trafficking investigation. However, the narrative quickly shifted when those protesting began labeling ICE's actions as outright kidnappings. Now, I've got to emphasize something here. ICE isn't just targeting random people. They focus on individuals involved in serious crimes, human trafficking, drug smuggling, you name it. And let's be clear, if they're arresting people who are involved in such heinous activities, isn't that something we should support? Moving on, let's take a closer look at the reactions from the crowd. Nick captured some intense moments where people were hurling objects at law enforcement, demanding answers and justice. One participant expressed frustration about how these operations affect their community. This brings us to a critical point. While frustration is understandable, defending alleged human traffickers doesn't help anyone. We must recognize that law enforcement has a tough job, one that often puts them in the line of fire both literally and figuratively. Here's a thought. Did you know that human trafficking is a $150 billion industry globally? It's staggering and tragic. And efforts to combat it should be supported, not protested against without understanding the full context. On top of that, let's not forget about the air quality issues being raised amid protests. One protester claimed it was the worst air quality index she'd ever seen, blaming everything on climate change and law enforcement actions. It raised an interesting discussion about priorities. Shouldn't we focus on the immediate threats to our communities first? We're witnessing complex situations where law enforcement is trying to do their jobs amidst public outcry. While concerns about civil liberties are valid, we can't lose sight of the bigger picture, protecting our communities from criminal activities like human trafficking and drug smuggling. It's essential to keep informed and engaged, but also to approach these issues with a nuanced understanding. As always, thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode or found it thought-provoking, please consider subscribing and sharing it with others. Don't forget to check out my books and audiobooks linked in the description below for more insights into politics, history, and more. Until next time, stay curious and keep thinking out loud.